like any good Indian economist, he knows that growth by itself is not adequate. We need to address issues of poverty.
Extremely bright and having a very powerful intellect.
Even when he disagrees, and disagrees strongly with colleagues or people from another ministry or whatever, that he's able to do so in a very pleasant way.
He's been the amazing backbone, in a way, of reforms, of economic reforms, of opening the economy, of bringing in competition.
Then I was asked to actually head the income distribution division, which was a new division in the bank, and it was sort of reflecting, this concern that growth has to benefit the poor also.
Indeed, around 1973-74, the bank brought out a fairly influential book for that period called Redistribution with Growth.
The bank at that time, took many of these ideas. Robert McNamara was the president. And he took many of these ideas actually from the Indian experience.
He's been with these subjects certainly very, very intimately and on the top of his thinking, certainly since 1970.
I did two sorts of things. One was international assessment of poverty, looking at different countries and what is called a cross-section analysis. The other thing I did was really on Indian trends in rural poverty. My basic argument was that underlying per capita growth has not taken place, but there's a lot of fluctuation around this. So depending on what points you use, you can come to the conclusion that poverty is going down, or you can come to the conclusion that poverty is going up. The position of economic advisor was advertised, and I think at that time the Secretary of Economic Affairs was Dr. Montek Singh, and he had visited Washington DC, so I had called on him and said, look, I'd like to come back, so what are the options? And he said that, well, there is this position, so why don't you apply for it? And I did, and I got in. In 1979, when I came back, that was a year of negative growth. There was very little recognition that in a successful economy, it's going to be a vibrant private sector that will find 30 ways of solving a problem, which a government process really can't do. 3 or 4 years down the road, at least my view was very clear, that we had to liberalize much more than we were doing and at a much faster pace.
In his initial years, when he was not yet at the top of the civil service system, one's impact is less. But I think it was, if you like, for a few years, a period of apprenticeship. But throughout, it was somebody who was pushing for liberalization.
In the second half of the 1980s, I was in the office of Mr. Rajiv Gandhi when he was Prime Minister, additional secretary to the Prime Minister. And he was very clear that we were working a system that was outmoded.
He did get a bit of the feel of sensible market economics, not in the sense of laissez-faire economics, but in terms of what could be done to de-license, expand capacities and improve the productivity and efficiency.
At the same time, I think he was very clear that, government wasn't going to abandon its role. Government had to have a directional role. In fact, one of the lines he was very fond of, which he used a lot, is we should give up controls without giving up control.
He was also involved in something we produced in the Finance Ministry during Mr. V.P. Singh's 2 years. And much of that period, he had a significant role, which is the long-term fiscal policy, which is trying to put fiscal policy in a medium-term setting.
The Congress government that came in 1991, I mean, in a way we are fortunate that Dr. Manmohan Singh was brought in as finance minister, so he was actually able to be the architect of the new policy.
This was a time when the financial sector reforms were introduced. Whether it is the recapitalization of capital or the introduction of prudential norms or licensing of new banks, we worked closely to see that the Indian financial system, the Indian banking system in particular, is strong.
And virtually from his first budget onwards, there were very clear signals that we have to do things differently. You know, a lot of people thought at the time that these signals were being given because the economy was in a crisis and you wouldn't get support from the IMF unless you gave these signals.
As part of the liberalization process, we felt the need not only to contain the fiscal deficit, but also to ensure that this deficit is also not monetized. The system of issuing ad hoc treasury bills had the effect of literally monetizing the fiscal deficit. So we entered into an agreement, the Reserve Bank of India and the government, to phase out the system.
Within 2 years, the crisis was over, and we had actually even withdrawn from getting any support from the IMF. But the reforms continued.
We introduced in late 91 or early 1992 a system of dual exchange rate. But by February 1993, we had shifted from the dual exchange rate system to a unified market-determined exchange rate system.
The full impact of these reforms is what you saw in the next decade. And basically, after growing at about 5.6, 5.7% in the 80s and the 90s, in the decade that's just ended, India will have grown at about 7.6%. So another 2 percentage point gain. And I think that is the real measure.
There was, a complete deregulation of industrial policy, or near complete. There was very systematic opening up of trade policy. Import licensing and all was not scrapped in one sweep, but over time during the 90s.
My sense is that I would give credit Montek for having played a role in chipping away, in persuading, in arguing, and being able to get this message across to a lot of people.
He is very deeply connected to the rural issues, and therefore I think while he talks a lot about the economic momentum, growth and all, underlying of that always is concern for people who are still not included in the mainstream.
The term inclusive growth is also associated with him. And if you look at some of his other research work that he's continued to produce, one on gradualism as to how that is a hallmark of Indian policy making.
You need the growth because the growth is what is providing the improvement in living standards for the top 70% actually. It's also providing the resources that enable you to do something about the bottom 30%, which is getting some benefit but not enough. And I think this is where the inclusiveness strategy, which we've been following in the 11th plan, which I'm sure we will have to follow in the 12th plan, becomes relevant.
He has been a considerable protagonist of the idea of public participation in governance, which is, of course, at the heart of inclusive planning, that the people must be involved in planning.
There's absolutely no doubt that we need more decentralization. I mean, in the sense that the benefit of decentralization, which comes from greater ownership, greater participation, greater potential accountability, and local monitoring. The logical implication of this would be that the money should go down to the district or the lower level panchayat, and the job of the ministry should be to give advice. in my view, in the 12th plan, we should expand that. But you know, when we say expand that, I mean, it must mean that you shift from tied funds to untied funds. It is a game changer because what it would do is it would put the money in the hands of those who need it, and all these people selling ideas would be forced to go there and persuade the farmer that, you know, I think my scheme is better than that fellow's scheme. Government is not used to competing.
Planning has moved from from a system of fixing the targets to a more flexible system. That has been accomplished.
Infrastructure is very, very important for the growth, but I believe a lot of infrastructure can be done through PPP. And so the one thing that I think is a mistake is people who feel that, no, we need a lot of money for infrastructure in the government.
The notion and the frameworks of public-private partnerships has been recognized, and one of the leading thinkers in this area for this country has been Montek. The 11th plan, since he's come into the Planning Commission, reflects this understanding and centers public-private partnerships as the driving force for investments in infrastructure.
He has brought in a lot of focus in the 11th plan on inclusive growth, and the way I see it, it's about, it's one thing to have 8% growth or 9% growth, but it's equally important that everybody participates in that growth.
Not only will the unique ID number, which any Indian resident will be able to get, not only will it enable them for sure to open a bank account without having to go through complex know your client kinds of requirements. It'll also enable a lot of the money that goes to people, whether it's for wage employment, Janani Suraksha Yojana, National Social Assistance Programs, etc. All of this to be transferred electronically.
He is much more concerned with the issues of poverty reduction, balanced regional development than what might appear to be.
There have been academics who've pointed this out, but Montek has fought the battle from within. And from what one knows and observes, it's not been an easy battle.
In the community of academic economists, research credentials are not so much in PhD as in research output. And Montek's papers are of a higher quality and have had a greater impact on the research literature than most PhD economists.
This combination of intellectual brilliance, professionalism and humor, good humor, is a rare combination which I valued and would certainly wish to emulate.
He's a very wise person, and I think it's been great to have him in the government for so many years.
Equally warm and understanding of the issues, but can hold his ground with strong logic against certain suggestions that may come from industry or other quarters.
Once asked him that, was it incredibly hard, was it very difficult for you to be back in India trying to talk about new ideas of economics back in the early 80s? And he said, actually it was great fun.
He was very obedient right from the very birth, very cooperative. और punishment को भागता नहीं था. In the bus once he went to school and came back. He was a little naughty, and the teacher asked him to report tomorrow at the stand. Come to him, and he would be punished. Without any afraid, he went to the teacher next day and said, "You wanted me to report." He was very happy. Are you reporting yourself? Other students who like to shirk and smirk and get away from me. You will be indeed somebody someday.
Thing about him that appealed to me the most when I met him was that he was a combination of great mind and tremendous sense of fun. Normally, before that, I'd spent 2 years at MIT amongst a lot of engineers when I was doing my PhD in economics. And I found the sort of men I respected intellectually were actually very boring to be with. And those that I enjoyed being with, I didn't respect. So it was the first time I met somebody whom I respected intellectually, and yet he was a lot of fun. He was very clear when I met him that he wanted to come back to India. And he was doing extremely well as a young professional at the bank. I was frankly not that keen at that time, but talking to him and seeing him so focused gave me this feeling that together we could really make a life in India which would be very worthwhile. And frankly, I had no idea that by the time we came back that it would be as fulfilling as it has been. I believe that, sometimes life puts you in situations where, you're offered challenges and you have to respond to them and put in your best. And I think he's been doing that. And we are very happy that, society has recognized, his efforts in doing that.
I think it's nice to have been there at the time when I actually saw the whole thing unfold. And there's no question that the country looks different. But if you say disappointment, I would have thought that we should have done a better job on inclusion. What we are failing to do is to deliver the public services. And public services are not delivered through income, they're delivered through the state setting up mechanisms for service delivery. And I think we need to be far more innovative in that. And that's what comes back to the issue of decentralization. Would we do a better job if we decentralize? There is a risk involved, but I'm very clear that I would rather take that risk. Not easy to do.